Today on the official Marvel podcast, we've got a star-studded episode featuring Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Emma Corrin, and so many more folks who brought you Marvel Studios Deadpool and Wolverine.
All of it just felt like the right time in the cultural landscape to have these two guys come back together and do a movie that is just an unabashed fastball of joy.
And guess what? We've waited long enough to finally get into some of those massive Deadpool and Wolverine spoilers.
Okay, finally, Quinn, because it has been so hard to keep everything hush hush. Plus, we also have writer Jonathan Hickman to break down his latest Wolverine comic, Wolverine Revenge.
I've never gotten to work with Greg Capullo before, and he's such a legend in the industry, and he's such a fantastic artist.
And if you've been reading Wolverine comics over the last few years, we've got a snicktastic surprise guest joining us later that you won't want to miss.
I'm Raylo.
I'm Quinn Lamar.
And this is the official Marvel podcast. So, Quinn, I have to ask, because we haven't been able to chat since the premiere of Deadpool and Wolverine, but what did you think without getting into any spoilers just yet?
I have so many thoughts, so many feelings. I thought it was amazing. It was everything I wanted it to be, everything I didn't know I wanted it to be, everything that it could be. Great experience. Loved it. What did you think?
That was a very diplomatic, no spoilers response. Chef's kiss to you. But same, we've been waiting to see these two best bubs get together. And I feel like it was a real full circle love moment. I laughed, I cried, I NSYNC danced. So as a millennial, I am stoked about this film.
What a fun time at the movies, honestly. And I'm so excited for today because we finally dig into some of those insane moments from Deadpool and Wolverine, including spoilers. Now, this is your last chance. Roll the spoiler alert.
Wee you, spoilers. We are officially in a full spoiler zone. Listen, you have been warned. Quinn warned you. That terrible sound effect I just did warn you. I'm warning you again. And the best part is we don't just get to share our favorite moments from the movie. We also get to hear from the stars and creators of Deadpool and Wolverine on bringing some of these craziest moments to life.
Seriously, if you haven't seen the movie yet, continue at your own risk. Now, if you're still with us, buckle up because we asked Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman some of your most burning questions.
And to start, Quinn, we had to ask Hugh Jackman about suiting up for the first time in that classic yellow suit, cowl and all.
I can't imagine why or how we never did it before now that I've seen it. And in fact, the moment I put it on, we walked on set together. And the first time I put it on, literally that crew in London, it was just a hush. It just felt right. I can't see the character any other way. And I absolutely loved it, except when I had to go to the bathroom. I loved it.
Me too. Just like 5 minutes just to find the thing.
It's true. It's like,
good Lord.
It's like a labyrinth.
Yeah, what is happening in there? Is it a hedge maze? Is that what that is? Yeah. Whoa. Was it the elevator from Prince's house? How did that get in there? My dad's ashes. I found my dad's ashes.
This happens every single day on set. At some point, this happens.
I love this pair together so much. I can't imagine all the shenanigans and craziness they get up to on the actual set of this movie.
Yeah, you can only imagine how many takes they had to go through. Everyone just busting stitches in front of the camera, behind the camera. But despite the shenanigans, here's what the duo had to say about working together on this film and how it differed from previous projects.
Those two characters being, I think, career-defining characters for both of us, even though he clearly has a much more vibrant career outside of his career-defining character. But I would say that it's a bit of that mixed with two people. So much of it is dumb luck in terms of timing, right? It just felt like you obviously were ready to do this again. It's been 6 years since I'd done it, played the character, and it just... all of it just felt like the right time in the cultural landscape to have these two guys come back together and do a movie that is just an unabashed fastball of joy.
We've been friends for 15 years, but our friendship just gets better and better, deeper and deeper, and we hang out a lot. So now being on set every day with one of my best buddies and Shawn, who's also, we like the Three Amigos. So that is not lost on any of us. And it's like, we are going to make the most of every single day. Even now, today, the whole thing is, pinch myself.
It is weird to be so consistently excited to see people you see every day.
Now, this really made for a fun and collaborative creative environment with a level of trust and the ability to experiment and try things openly, and take risks. And the love between the two of them really shines in this.
Hugh delivers this monologue in the van right before we fight, where he just disassembles Deadpool. Very verbose and odd, because not a character who has monologues, Wolverine, but we get to a license with this because he's a little bit different. Sitting front row seat to that, where I'm usually the chatty Cathy, but this getting to watch Hugh feel every syllable of that speech and just like watching it executed at that level. As someone who wrote that speech, I was having an out-of-body experience. I was like, I've never felt so good about anything in my life while still trying to stay in character and sort of feel that humiliation that he's dispensing. But watching him work like that was one of the highlights of my entire career, probably.
I remember that scene very well. It was incredible. But every day on set, I laughed until I cried. There's so many times he would do things that I didn't expect that is so brilliant. And yet I think the thing what burns with me in Ryan's performance is the humanity. That there is it's earned because obviously he's funny, he's subversive, and the character deflects all the time. But when you get to see it, when he opens up and when you see what's happening in those eyes, and that's all there is. Sometimes there's not even that because of the mask, but even without the mask, it's in his voice, in everything. He's a brilliant, brilliant actor and he cares so much about the character that he wants to show all sides perfectly.
I get so excited to see these actors take these characters so seriously and try to humanize them on screen for us. So as for Hugh's performance of Wolverine, the duo says that they owe it all to something that Hugh believes he's never quite been able to capture before.
This idea of that berserker rage, in the height of that, stuff happens where it's indiscriminate. If you're in his path when he's in that berserker rage, you're going down. And it's also a time where I think, how I play it, he's never more alive than when he's like that. So it terrifies him. It's filled with shame because of what happens and what he's done in his life. And yet he also never feels more alive than like that. And that kind of conflict for me at the core of someone is what makes Wolverine who he is. But I don't think we'd successfully ever been able to get that across. And it was the writing these guys did. This idea that something that had happened in the past where he'd done terrible things.
And it was what kind of unlocked the idea of he's the worst Wolverine. That for us was like everything. That became like the greatest fertilizer for all this.
Now, Deadpool and Wolverine also have some pretty spectacular needle drops. The music is top tier. So, of course, we had to ask Ryan Reynolds how he approached picking songs for the movie.
I don't even know. It's like a weird thing. Like a Prayer, Madonna's. That was in my head since Deadpool 2. That exact sequence, actually, just not fighting the Deadpool core. We had to go meet with Madonna, which was kind of an amazing pinch me moment. And, I sort of felt like she has some authorship over this movie just because it started with that song. The whole movie started with that one song.
According to second unit director George Cottle, the fact that this whole movie started with that one song, that one idea, that one little music bug Ryan Reynolds got stuck in his head is a testament to Reynolds' visionary genius.
Ryan said to me, he's like, I have been dreaming about this shot for, I think he said 7 or 9 years. He's like, from the shot to the framing, to the song, to the action. He's like, we are doing it. I was like, okay. You know what's funny? In all the years I've been doing this and some of the incredible people I've been working with and some of the places I've been and the actors I've worked with, probably one of the most Hollywood iconic texts I ever received in my whole career was the day before Christmas Eve, I think, or a couple of days before Christmas Eve. I was at home with my family in LA. My phone text, and it was Shawn saying, send me the video of the one-er. Ryan and I are at a party and Madonna's here and I want to show it to her. And I was like, that might be the most Hollywood text I've ever, and I think I screenshotted the text. But immediately I was like, yes, sir, you got it. And I sent him the video and it just plays.
And it's not just the song, it's the scene in its entirety that takes the cake. I mean, it's an incredible 2-minute long one-shot take where Deadpool and Wolverine fight their way through many Deadpool variants. Here's George elaborating on the intricacies of this scene.
When we first talked about it, I saw the storyboards, and the storyboards were incredible. And the difficulty of pulling off something like that and the implications of putting all of those pieces of the pies together are so massive that it never really happened.
So much so that George didn't think it actually even come to fruition.
So when they talked about this very early on, I was like, here we go. But when you shoot a movie like this, when you commit to a oneer, you don't have anywhere else to go. Like, you are committing to what that shot is.
With Ryan's vision and George's technical know-how, there was just one last piece to the puzzle missing. Who were Deadpool and Wolverine going to fight?
Well, the solution actually came to Shawn Levy, the director of Deadpool and Wolverine, while reading Deadpool comics.
I read at least 100 issues of the comics while I was writing with Ryan and prepping the movie. I don't know that I ever quite understood and knew with full fluency about the Deadpool core. And that was in one of the first Deadpool comics that I had asked Marvel, just bury me in comics. And they did. And I would just read them all the time. And as soon as I saw the core, I knew that, wow, if we could find a story reason to bring all these Deadpool variants into the movie, that would be an interesting twist in the third act. And so that's what we did. And that came straight from the comics.
I love that he goes from being buried in Marvel Comics to then being buried in a mountain of Deadpools. It was clearly, truly destiny for Shawn. I guess it's part of what makes Marvel so unique, though, right? There are so many ideas that start off as a single comic book panel, and it just expands from there.
And it speaks to like the skill to be able to make that happen in real life. And if you guys are wondering, that day on set was just as fun as you'd expect it to be.
Yeah, I mean, what was fun about that day is these are stuntmen and stuntwomen who were so excited to be playing a Deadpool. And so it was freezing cold, but every one of those stunt performers was themselves experiencing a thrill that they got to be Deadpool. Today, it's not just Ryan Reynolds. I get to be Deadpool. And every one of the stunt performers felt that privilege and that thrill, and you could feel it on set.
That's so amazing. I think it's a testament to this character that Ryan Reynolds has made, that so many people were able to recreate those minute motions and movements that we've come to know from Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and translate it to their own variant. But can you imagine the mess of trying to track down Ryan Reynolds on set that day? Because I feel so sorry for the PA who was left playing real life Where's Waldo in a sea of Deadpools.
A sea of Deadpool, pools of Deadpools. I cannot imagine what that must have been like. But besides the hordes of Deadpools, we have to dig into all of those insane cameos in Deadpool and Wolverine. According to Shawn, the team was pretty strategic about who they wanted to bring back.
The vibe on set was a party. We wanted to play with this theme of legacy. And so we started thinking about characters who never quite got their ending. And when we had all of these characters together, and you have X-23, and you have Blade, and you have Gambit, and you have Elektra, everyone was so happy and grateful. You know, when you have people like Channing Tatum who wanted to play Gambit for 10 years, or more. And this is that moment. Everyone was just so grateful and happy to be there. And so we got the work done and we had a lot of fun, but there was just a feeling of, wow, what a privilege to do this job. And that's something I'll never forget.
Now, Shawn did strive to ground this movie in reality as much as possible. And a lot of that had to do with the star characters in the movie.
Because the truth is, I was welcomed in not to make just another MCU movie. I was brought in to make a Deadpool and Wolverine movie. And those are real world characters. They don't have magic powers. They aren't from space or another dimension. They are from Earth, and their powers are raw and gritty and authentic to real life. So it gave me a language where, yes, we're playing with premise and characters and settings that are larger than life, but anti-heroes who are earthbound. And so I wanted the style of the movie to be fun and visually captivating, but always feel a little gritty. We used more handheld than I've used on most films I've ever made. And just keeping it real, because I think that's what we want out of Logan and Wade. We want to keep it real.
Shawn also established a very collaborative environment on set. That helped Emma Corrin, who plays the evil mutant twin of Professor Xavier, Cassandra Nova, as they created and delivered a unique take on an MCU villain.
They're so collaborative, and they paved the way for, me to have a lot of freedom and kind of take the role where I felt like I wanted it to go. And the script was so rich as well and offered so much that I didn't have to look very far. What they wrote and created together was a great jumping off place. So I think Cassandra is completely the hero of her own storyline. She's completely convinced by what she's doing, which is a lot of fun to play. And they wanted her to be unpredictable. And for these guys who are such familiar and beloved anti-heroes to us to be really confused by her and completely not know what to make, which was great. I think I wasn't expecting to end up empathizing with her as much as I do. Obviously, she's evil and that's a given, and she's a bit kooky and that's a given. But I think she also has real reasons as to why she is the way she is, and those were really interesting to explore. The key into Cassandra for me was her thinking about her brother and how being the twin sister of Charles Xavier, when he is so beloved and benevolent and he's renounced you at birth, interests her. It's so interesting that she went the opposite way and became like the most evil person, sort of the yin to his yang.
But that's really what completes the MCU, is this constant fight of good and bad. Now, when it comes to developing Cassandra Nova's iconic look, Emma believes that staying faithful to the comic book origins was the right thing to do.
Yeah, we tried a few things before we settled on the look we did. And I mean, her look in the comics is so impactful. She could be anywhere between like 75 and 15 years old. So it was kind of like really creepy. And yeah, putting that on first day on set, ball cap, prosthetic fingers, the collar, everything. It just, it zips you up into the character.
It was one thing to dress the part, but it was another thing to walk the walk. And achieving the look from comics was one thing, but in order to fully embody the character, Emma worked with a movement coach to help bring the character's mobility and playfulness to the big screen.
Something in her sort of nimbleness and slightness in the comics made me think about what fun you could have by portraying someone with such immense power, but making them feel quite nimble.
When it comes to sharing a scene with the film's titular heroes, Deadpool and Wolverine, who are pretty gruff, it's that nimbleness and gravitas that really sets Cassandra Nova apart.
It was such a privilege to share those moments with them, to be in scenes with them. I mean, it was a real pinch me moment. They're incredible actors, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, all of it was pretty standout to me because I'd never done anything of this scale before. And some of you'll see, I think, in the film, like a lot of Cassandra scenes with Wolverine are quite moving, actually, because of their shared history with Charles Xavier, and Cassandra has a real fascination in Wolverine because of that. So those scenes were particularly, hold a special place for me.
Now, Emma Corrin was tasked with bringing the character of Cassandra Nova to life. Visual effects supervisor Swen Gillberg was the mind behind Cassandra's psychic powers and abilities.
We played a bunch of different options here. And again, we ended up with something a little more grounded, but you'll notice it's subtle. But when she's flicking the guys around like rag dolls, there's almost like a heat distortion that comes off her hands. We call it Cassandra magic.
That said, there was one other ability from the comics that was absolutely vital for the portrayal of the character.
We call it the hands through face. If you look through the comics, and there's lots of them, she literally forces her hands through the face and into the brains and just starts poking around mentally in there. And she's delving into their minds to find out their secrets and also to control them. But mostly she's on an information gathering thing. There's no way around it. So we just did our best to do the most photorealistic version of the comic books. You'll see her fingers coming into the mouth or going across an eye socket, and we'd scoot the skull around or scoot her fingers into the skull when needed. But we would try to use that as a sort of storytelling device, like sliding over a cheekbone, it would have to go a little higher. And then we always tried to, when it made sense, to go through the orifices. So you'll see the fingers come out ears and go in eyes and out noses, but they can also come out the cheeks or whatever. So whatever works for the shot.
And you can keep your angry letter-writing hands down because there were no actual hands that went through any faces here. To achieve hands through face, the VFX team ran special effects tests to sample what it would look like for a hand to actually go under someone's skin.
It's more about the hands pushing the skin and the hair aside. So it's how much the interaction between the fingers react, if it's just a straight hole or a bigger hole. So we played with that a bunch. We also played a lot with, you'll see when the fingers go over the eyeballs or in front of the eyeballs pop out, and it's great.
Listen, Quinn, as much as I loved seeing that scene on screen, I'm so glad that I wasn't there for any of the testing phases. I'm completely cool with that.
I love it.
Initially, the team set out to shoot 2 passes with each actor during a scene that featured this hands through face, one with the actor and another with a stand-in model of a head. And that made it so that Emma's character could actually push their hand through something.
But we soon got rid of that idea because it was just too cumbersome. And most importantly, we want the actors to act with each other and against each other. And we really want to key into their performance. We don't want any of that lost in the effects. And you really want them looking into each other's eyes and acting together.
From there, the VFX team would match the digital face of an actor to their performance.
We'd match exactly their eye blinks, exactly their eye movements, any subtle movement with their mouth, so that we'd often try to use a portion of their real face, but when the hand's underneath it and sliding around, it's mostly needs to be digital. And then we jam her hands or the face, and so we animate all that. And during that phase in our development process, we played with different skin thicknesses. And we found that I liked it thinner because we actually want to start seeing the details of her like knuckles in his skin, her cuticles. We want to see that kind of detail and see it as it's crossing over his face. So sometimes the skin is thicker and we would just dial it in to taste in the shots. But I always tried to see, you actually want to feel her knuckles in there and all that. So we played it quite thin.
Quinn, I really can't understand how this ended up being an R-rated movie. So when you find out, you tell me.
Oh, it's so dope.
It is. I mean, the amount of detail they're putting into grossing us out. Well, I love getting to hear about all the behind the scenes for these pieces that we get to see come to life on screen. Now that you've got an inside look at all these behind the scenes spoilers, grab a friend and schedule another viewing of Marvel Studios Deadpool and Wolverine, now playing only in theaters.
Now, if you didn't get enough Wolverine in Deadpool and Wolverine, or you're just looking for a solid place to get into Wolverine comics, official Marvel Podcast co-host and friend Preeti Chibber's got you covered.
And she's joined by Jonathan Hickman, who's known for writing comics like X-Men, Avengers, Secret Wars, The Fantastic Four, and oh my gosh, so much more. And now alongside artist Greg Capullo, he's tackling Wolverine in his new miniseries, Wolverine Revenge.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm very excited to talk to you about Wolverine today. First big question, who is Wolverine?
Well, who is Wolverine? We are recording this on July 25th. I believe he's getting ready to be in the biggest movie in the world this week. So he's an incredibly obscure character that you may not have heard of.
Something that I am curious about is what your history with Wolverine is like. Like, do you remember the first time you ever saw him?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm old, so it was a long time ago. I've been reading Wolverine in comics for 40 years, right? So it was a long time ago, pretty close to his introduction. He got introduced in Hulk, but pretty quickly was revealed to be a member of Alpha Flight, which then he, showed up in the X-Men books. And X-Men was always my favorite Marvel book when I was growing up. And so, I was there whenever he first started showing up. So it was early on. So had to have been, pre-Dark Phoenix saga or sometime around then.
So you've got a new project with artist Greg Capullo coming out called Wolverine Revenge, and we are pretty excited for it. So what I want to know is, can you tell us a little bit about what the process was in creating it? Like, how did it come about?
Well, when we found out that Greg Capullo was going to come to Marvel and draw a book, and he wanted to do Wolverine, they asked me if I would be interested in doing it. And I, of course, said yes, because I've never gotten to work with Greg Capullo before, and he's such a legend in the industry, and he's such a fantastic artist. That's how the project came together. Let's do a thing. And so then we talked about what we wanted the story to be, and Greg had some very specific tonal things that he wanted to be in the book. He wanted it to have a certain attitude and a certain visceral feel. And so that's kind of what the genesis of the book was, and then I shaped the story around it.
Sometimes people don't know how much of comics can be like, I really want to work with this person and I'm excited to see what we can create together. And it's like that magical thing when you hit on a character that you both have feelings for and want to produce something interesting and new with. What is it about Wolverine, I think, that is so special? Like if someone is coming to Wolverine as maybe a newish comic book reader, what is something special about him and Wolverine comics in particular?
Well, it's a little tricky because he's not Spider-Man, which everybody knows who the character is and everybody loves and everybody identifies with. But he is a character that's from a family of books, the X-Men, that a lot of people identify with. If you're a bit of a loner, or if you're a bit rough around the edges, or if you have a past that you would rather leave behind, or, and on and on and on and on, the way that people identify with characters. He's one of those characters that is unassailably easy to identify with, whether you identify with him personally or you identify with, wow, this guy is cool, and I would like to take part in a thing with this guy. And that's the thing that he has going for him, is that he's always been very roguish, very Han Solo. It's a story, like Star Wars is a story about the Jedi, but really it's Han Solo that's the cool guy, so that's kind of why people love him.
Where is Logan at the beginning of your story? What will readers need to know coming into it? Nothing
really. It takes place 2 years in the future, 3 years in the future, right? It's one of those kind of stories. So I don't want to give too much away because the first page is a big kind of whoa thing. But it takes place a couple of years in the future, and something happens and Wolverine has to go do certain things. And in the doing of those things, bad stuff happens, and then he wants revenge, So it's not Western in the way that Old Man Logan was, which is a story that's a very popular Wolverine story. But it is Western in the sense of it has a huge scale and the motivations are very simple in the heart of the book. Somebody has done something wrong and somebody's got to pay.
Like, no spoilers. But based on some of the promo around the first issue, you tease readers can expect Wolverine to go up against some of his biggest foes. Can you expand on that at all?
Well, some of those characters are very obvious. I think the thing that people will be surprised is who some of the people that he's going up against. And again, we don't want to spoil it, but some of them are not surprising. It's not surprising that we found a way to weasel Deadpool into this, and Sabretooth is in it, and Mastermind, and some classic X-villains, specifically Wolverine villains like Omega Red. But there's a couple of instances in here where there's some surprise characters, and the reason for that is the way that the book starts. And so, that's a thing that you want to do. You want to give people kind of the matchups that they're expecting, but then you always want to surprise them with something that they weren't expecting. And so, we do that in this book.
Was there anything that you were really excited to include?
Well, it wasn't as much about hitting specific story beats. It was really more about working with Greg. And then when Greg's pages start rolling in, it excites you and you can see what he's adding to it. It's like a feedback loop. It just makes you want to do more and more creative stuff. And that's what the fun is. I guess I should also add that we did this in Marvel style, which is, if you don't know, normally comic book scripts these days are written full script, which means that you break down the page, you break down each individual panel, you describe what's in it, you write the dialogue, and then the artist goes off and draws it. The way it was done years and years and years ago is something called Marvel style, which is where you kind of write an outline of the book, and then the artist goes and interprets all of that, and then you script the dialogue afterwards. And that's how this book was done. And so there's a lot of back and forth between me and Greg as we're creating this. of here's an idea, Greg interprets it, and then I reinterpret his interpretation in the dialogue. So it's a lot of fun to work that way. You have to be comfortable. You have to have done it, and I've done a lot of that over the years. And so I always love working that way when I have the opportunity.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's very, I love process, and I love the idea of how writers approach the process of creating something like a comic book, which is by nature such a collaborative project and such a piece of art that comes from so many different minds. What do you hope readers take away from Wolverine Revenge?
Oh, goodness. It's the same thing I always do. I just want people to have a good time reading it. The two most important words to me are surprise and delight. And I want the reader to always be surprised when they read a book of mine, and I always want them to be delighted. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, obviously, but it's super important to me that that's part of it. And I just, I've been doing this a while now, and I don't ever take for granted that I've done a good book. I'm my harshest critic all the time. And I've never forgotten. I guess the best way to put it is I've never forgotten the joy that I had when I was younger of reading a book that did that for me. And I want to do that for other people. I think it's the best way to put it.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you coming by to talk to us about our favorite little guy, Wolverine.
Of course. Of course.
It is so cool to hear Jonathan talk about creating a comic using the Marvel style, which is a collaborative approach some fans might also know as the Marvel method.
Yes, and I'm so excited to delve into Wolverine Revenge later this month.
Now, while we just spent some time with Jonathan Hickman and his upcoming Wolverine miniseries, there's another writer who's written Wolverine since 2017 and has closed out an incredible run of Wolverine comics.
This includes 50 issues of Wolverine, another 50 issues of X-Force, which stars Wolverine, the Wolverine crossover event 10 Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine, 2 podcast series, Wolverine The Long Night and Wolverine The Lost Trail, and so much more.
That all said, we thought it'd be a great idea to bring him onto the show to celebrate and reflect a bit on his time writing Logan, his relationship with the character, and really close us out.
Hey everybody, my name is Benjamin Percy, and since 2017, I have been the writer on Wolverine. And this character who is my favorite of any comics character. It's been such a privilege to be a custodian of Logan all this time. He means a lot to me. He means a lot to a lot of people. I've said before that I love Logan in part because I'm a square-shaped, cranky, smelly, hairy loner who lives in the frozen north and loves to chew on cigars and swill whiskey. So it always feels like a form of thinly veiled autobiography. But there's, so much more to it than that. And part of it is, this is a character who, despite all of his faults, is trying to do the best he can. He might be drawn into the fray with reluctance, but he's going to make sure that he walks away from that battlefield on the right side of the win. And he's going to do everything he can to protect the vulnerable. And despite the fact that he is, almost this eternal being, despite the fact that he's a walking war machine and sleeved in adamantium, and I know he has those extra normal characteristics, but in a way he's like one of us and fighting for us. Before I let you go, I have one last thing I want to share with you. When I think about the most meaningful line that I've written in Wolverine, I'm going to circle back to the beginning when I think about the end. The question that was raised in issue number 1 was whether Wolverine could be happy, whether that was possible. And in the final issue, I send us off with this line. When I find myself there, when the blood and the pain come as they always come, I will remember this time as one of the happiest of my life. And that line right there is also reflective of my time in the X group. as, an incredibly meaningful experience. So, Logan's not just Logan. He's Weapon X. He's, Howlett. He's a character who grew up in Canada but moved to Japan and Madripoor and fought his way through so many war zones and went to Westchester, went to Krakoa, and he's going to continue to move about and reinvent himself in the years to come. But the hope is that this Krakoan age is a signature moment, not just for the X-Men, but for this character. And when he looks back, when I look back, it feels like a definitive moment in my career. And I won't shed a tear because I'm only capable of producing pebbles out of my eyes. But it was a hell of a time. And even though I have hung up my claws on the main title, I'm not done with Logan yet.
Next week on the official Marvel podcast, we're joined by your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man showrunner, Jeff Trammell.
Growing up, loving Spider-Man, the animated series, loving Spectacular Spider-Man, I get to play in that sandbox and kind of leave my own stamp for it. And that means that the same way I grew up with those shows, someone's going to grow up with this show, and this is going to be their Spider-Man.
But in the meantime, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. We really appreciate it.
And tell a friend about us. I actually met so many new friends and listeners at San Diego Comic-Con, and I did promise them that if they were listening, I'd send out a little shout out. So hi, friends from SDCC.
That's it for today. This episode of the official Marvel podcast was hosted by Raylo and myself, Quinn Lamar, featuring Preeti Chibber.
Our producer is Jasmine Estrada.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Justin Harris.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
I mean, the triumph of Peggy as Dogpool is, first of all, she is an award winner. I just want the world to know she did win Ugliest Dog in Britain. We did a global search, and Peggy beat out lots of contestants because of her sheer ugliness. Peggy had never been trained to do anything. So once we found Peggy, which was a revelation, she went into training for this movie. And she trained learning how to run, learning how to hit a mark, learning how to look at something. So she did incredibly well, and now she's famous.